then I would tell you, in terms of the Florida Civic Advance, we are an organization, a membership organization statewide, who are focused on trying to advance the civic health in Florida communities. And for us, the issue is we have, by a number of metrics that are as regrettably as not more recent than 2015, we have basically the third largest state, but have really have metrics that are at the bottom end of all states in terms of our civic life and civic health. And the Florida Civic Advance has been a convener. Going back to 2015 when we did our first statewide summit, but more recently we did a statewide summit in October 2023 in St. Pete. We have brought together thinkers, and we are trying to advance the conversation and lead to implementing actions at the community level. So I'm going to skip over the slides, and I think I'm just turn it over, Janice, to you, and you can introduce the speakers. And I'll just mention Janice is a member of the Florida Civic Advance Board, and she is a representative, commissioner with the Panama City City Commission, and represents Ward 2 in that community. And she was a founder and executive director of the LEAD Coalition in Bay County, which took action after Hurricane Michael, which devastated Panama City and Panama City Beach and Mexico Beach, and you may recall in 2018. She's got a background as a journalist. She is taught both at Gulf Coast Community College as well as the FSU Panama City campus. And she worked in the past and continues to have connections with the Kettering Foundation. So Janice, welcome, and you can introduce the panel and we'll proceed.
Well, good morning, and thank you so much, Robert. The slideshow is still showing. Is it?
I'm going to stop.
Going to stay on the screen?
No.
All right. It's a pleasure to greet all of you this morning, and we'll jump right into why we're here. Welcome to Restoring Civility and Building Bridges in Divided Times. We're honored to have two distinguished guests who've each made tremendous contributions in public service and who have thought deeply about how we might address the divides that seem to challenge our society today. So first, I want to welcome Dennis A. Ross, a professor of political science at Southeastern University in Florida, a retired U.S. congressman. He went to Washington, D.C. and lived to tell about it, and the author of a heartfelt memoir. His work reflects on the power of public service, the value of humility, and the role of civics in strengthening our republic. Dennis, thank you for being here, and good morning.
Good morning, and thank you for having me. It's an honor to be here, especially with the distinguished Dick Batchelor, who has a tremendous history in Florida politics and truly knows how to build bridges.
Thank you.
Welcome again. Joining us also is Dick Batchelor, the author of Building Bridges in Toxic Political Times. Dick has a wealth of experience in political and civic life and has written a powerful guide for finding common ground across many kinds of differences, whether in politics, business, or even personal relationships. Dick, welcome.
Thank you very much. And I have to reciprocate with the Congressman Ross. It's always a pleasure. After spending 4 years in the Florida legislature, I ran for Congress in 1982, and the voters retired me. I didn't win that one.
Well, welcome as well. So we'll jump right in. The current political presidential campaign exemplifies what Dick Batchelor calls an age of animosity, particularly through heightened polarization, divisive rhetoric, and a pervasive focus on conflict over common ground. One of the ways this campaign reflects Batchelor's concept is the intensified partisan divisions. I was just in a doctor's office and saw no less than 10 commercials that exemplified or were exactly what this was, the partisan divisions. And so as we jump right in today, let's turn the table a little bit. I think we're all very familiar with what divides us. I'd like to ask either Dick or Dennis to start us off with examples that you've experienced and are aware of that are going on now of people working across the aisles and finding common ground. That is not the picture that we often see.
I'll let the congressman defer. I'll defer to him because I know there are different caucuses in the Congress that he probably participated in, Democrats, Republicans, where they come together around an issue, whether it might be climate change or whatever, But I'm sure he has some great examples. But what I would say is that the kind of the thesis of my see is that there's some things we will not agree on across the aisle. We just won't. And some of those issues are on the ballot, and they're certainly before us in the presidential bid, and we don't have to belabor the toxicity there. But can you set aside those differences, though, and convene around things that you can find agreement on that are not politically necessary? They're not partisan by any stretch of the imagination. And one example in our community and many communities throughout the country now is the fentanyl overdoses. Fentanyl is being used to spike drugs, whether it's OxyContin and marijuana. And fentanyl is 50 times more powerful than heroin. Fentanyl will kill you, and it will not discriminate. It's not partisan. Democrats, Republicans, NPAs, independents, fentanyl will kill you. Now, that's not a Democratic issue, a Republican issue. The public policy issue is one that you can set aside your other differences and convene around that. So I think we could talk about fentanyl, human trafficking, domestic violence, child abuse. There are issues that we can identify. We can set aside our partisan differences on some of the major issues, but convene around those by setting aside those differences if you're willing to do that.
And to segue, if I might just segue
Yes.
on that, Dick is right on point, that we have more in common than we have in difference. And there are certain things that we're just never going to agree on. But if we focus somewhat on what we do all have in common and which we agree, I think we build a solid foundation. An example in Congress for me was when the aftermath of Hurricane Irma in 2017, Florida was kind of left out of disaster relief. And I saw a tremendous collaboration between the Republicans and Democrats in Florida get together and demand, especially for the sake of not only our residents, but also our agricultural industry, that we have the relief that we were promised and that was being held up for political reasons by other people in leadership. And I worked together well, I think, with my friends Debbie Wasserman Schultz and others in the Democrat Party to do what we needed to do. We finally succeeded, but if it wasn't for a bipartisan effort, we probably wouldn't have.
So certainly the reality of what we're going to be talking about today exists. It's not foreign that we'll be able to work together either on the issues of fentanyl or when there's great harm that's happened, and we need to come together to find that relief, as the congressman just said. Dick, in your book, you offer specific strategies to bring people together. What is one strategy you think is especially effective in these times?
Well, I think you've got to decide what the truth of the matter is on an issue and be able to define it very, very clearly so it will appeal to more than one side of those who might be engaged. But let's be honest here. It's not kumbaya always. And some issues, again, there's such toxicity. The congressman might agree with this. I think there are two things that are important in politics. One is political currency is very hard to earn, but very, very easy to lose. And another thing I've observed in politics, and this is when the right is yelling beyond the left and the left is yelling back beyond the right. And that is, there's some people get elected to office, and I think the congressman is a prime example, who wants to be well known for getting things done. But there's some politicians on both sides of the aisle, left and right, who want to be well known for being well known. That's it. They've got their Facebook followers or Twitter accounts /X followers, and they build a constituency that they respond to. And oftentimes their constituency is beyond the borders of the congressional district. So the point is, you've got to be able to set those aside and be honest about it and come together. And one final point to show that we're not just talking about something that really is naive, and that is some people you don't invite to the meeting. Some people you do not want at the table. If someone is innately toxic and they're not looking for a solution, they don't need to be at the table. You would defeat your purpose. So you got to decide who you want at the table, and they can set aside differences. They convene around an issue that you can agree on.
If I may, in your book, you described the Florida Children's Trust, and that you were able to pull together across many differences, folk, and the strategies that you were just telling us about, were those strategies you invoked or followed for getting the Florida Children's Trust going? Well,
now that's an interesting one, because there was kind of a approach avoidance. And that, to this extent, we, of course, the Children's Trust was started as a Miami-Dade Children's Trust. In fact, David Lawrence, a former publisher of the Miami Herald, led that effort after Janet Reno led the effort, which had failed. But David Lawrence convened and met with every city commissioner in Miami-Dade, every one of them, to get them on board before he went public with the campaign. In Orange County, we tried to do it and could not get it on the agenda for the county commission. Then we could not get the county commission chair to agree to put it on the ballot so the voters could express their view. So what I did is we put together a county commission meeting, and I had 50 not-for-profits come testify as to the unmet needs of children. So we defined the problem. We invited people to the table, but we could not get the mayor at the time to put it on the ballot. But what the mayor did do is, on the way out of office, because she had term limited out, put an additional $20 million into the budget for children's programs. I post haste went to the incoming mayor, Jerry Demings, and said, will you commit to put the $20 million, the new $20 million, in the budget every year that you're here, which will be, of course, 8 years. And if you combine that, you're looking at $180 million. So while the Children's Trust did not get on the ballot, so ergo it did not pass, but we were able to convene around with people, in fact, some on the opposite side, to say, yes, we will put this in the budget anyway. So we ended up getting funding for children's programs, but not under the aegis of Children's Trust.
So start somewhere, and you'll get somewhere, as long as you stay focused and use the strategies that you've outlined.
Absolutely.
Dennis, turning to you, you acknowledge that personal ambition was a primary motivator for you earlier in your career, but along the way, you were humbled into the Rotarian motto of service over self, a philosophy that encourages people to put others before themselves and to do what's best for the greater good. How did this change of heart affect your ability to be successful in Congress?
Thank you, Janice. It's interesting because I did have ambition for the title at an early age. And then once I was given the title, I felt the weight and gravity of the public trust and understood that campaigning is one thing and governing is a totally different thing. And when you have that public trust, you don't want to betray it. And I saw myself coming back every 2 years for an election, bringing up the same issues and asking the constituency to trust me and keep trusting me, and yet sometimes not being able to make any headway. And I think that frustration got to me, and I realized that if we're going to accomplish anything, it's not about putting it in a campaign soundbite. It's about actually being able to reach across the aisle and collaborate with the other side and getting things done. And Dick served in the time of the Florida legislature when the Democrats were in control, but yet there was a spirit of collegiality, I think, back then. There was a spirit of getting things done, and there wasn't a spirit of punishing the minority, as I think you see today happening both in the state level and in the federal level. And so, what really struck me was that the office itself gives you such a great responsibility that you have no room to betray that if you want to be successful. And in order to not betray it, it's not about you. It's about being able to bring all into the concerns to make it a better community.
Yeah, it's what I call, after having taken the oath, on this side of the oath, as someone who is active in community, and had my perception of elected officials, now that I are one on this side, though, it's very different, and that weight certainly can make a difference in that. Civility is a central theme for both of you. Dennis, how do you think we can encourage civility among the next generation of leaders? Because certainly they're cut from a different cloth than our generation. What role should schools and community programs play in helping to shape future generations and civility?
Janice, they should play a significant role. We have, I think, failed for the last 30 years in our K through 12 education and prioritizing social studies and civics as part of the curriculum, not just for one course, but throughout their 12-year or 13-year, through when you speak of K through 12 education. It is so important to be able to teach these students the significance of being able to work together. I teach a civics course in which we use primary sources, but what's interesting is that we require the students to now discuss the primary sources that they read with the other ones and come up to a solution. And in doing so, you learn a sense about why the other person feels the way they do. You may not agree with them, but through a process of empathetic listening, you understand why they feel the way they do. And then you also find out what you have in common. We need to be instilling in the education level a sense of understanding of each other's perspective. And you do that through proper education techniques that we can employ through humanities, through civics, through social studies. In the community level, we need to be recognizing young leadership. You know, when I was a student growing up, we had essay contests, we had speech contests. You had civic clubs that would recognize and elevate young leadership, which I think we're not seeing like we should. Instead of demoralizing those who lead us at every level of government, we need to be nurturing, recognizing, and praising those who are up-and-coming young leaders. The same way we do it with athletics or arts, we need to be doing the same thing with community development of good leadership. And I think that's why this webinar is so important, because everything starts at the community level.
Thank you. Dick, would you like to add to that?
Yeah, let me add to it. Dennis is very familiar and has participated with the Lou Fry Institute.
Yes.
It's a prime example of what he's talking about. The Lou Fry Institute basically based at the University of Central Florida, named after the late Congressman, the Republican Congressman Lou Fry. And it basically teaches teachers how to teach civics.
Yeah.
You know, and if you don't understand the government structure, that frustrates the young population because they're impatient to begin with. Of course, I am impatient too. I always have been. But they get impatient. But the civics programs teaches them how the government process works. And I say, don't be intimidated by the political process. If you understand it, it won't intimidate you. It will tell you how to access. What are the access points to have influence, whether it's at the local level, the state level, the federal level, wherever it might be, or on an issue campaign. So I think civics is great because it does, and I hate to use the word, it's like a strong word, arms students to best understand the process, not to be intimidated by the process, but invite yourself to participate in the process. And that's the only way we're going to find some of these solutions, whether it's climate change or whatever issues that might be on the top of the GZ list.
So one example here in Bay County is the Chamber of Commerce. The Bay County Chamber of Commerce not only has its adult leadership program, but it has a specific youth leadership program that is designed specifically to do what you and Dennis have encouraged, and that is to put our hands on these young folk and connect them with real experiences, what we used to call field trips.
Yeah.
You know, educational system has moved away for any number of reasons for field trips for the majority of kids. And those experiences kindle the fires of young minds and hearts to want to be of service and to do those sorts of things. Yeah. You know, Putnam wrote a book about 20 years ago, Bowling Alone, and he talked about how we as a society were moving away from organized activities. And would you say that this dearth of experience and interest in civics among our youth would also fit what Putnam described as a society that now bowls alone?
I would definitely agree with that. And if we're not teaching them, if they're not understanding the history of how we got to where we are, then they can only come up with based on their own personal experiences. And as we become more and more isolated and not social because of social media or digital platforms, I think it does more to denigrate our ability to be the leaders that we were meant to be.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I always make the point with young people. I say there are three things that you need to do or be prepared to do to be an effective advocate. Number one, you have to have a passion for what you're doing. If you don't have a passion for it, you're not going to last very long at all. You've got to embrace something around which you can wrap your passion to be an effective advocate. Secondly, you have to have faith that what you're doing will make a difference. If at some point in time you've lost faith that your involvement and you're engaging with others won't make a difference, you'll lose it. You'll lose the passion and the faith. And the last thing you have to be prepared to do is tell an elected official when they're wrong.
Yes.
Not in a polite way, a diplomatic way, but nevertheless, you've got to be able to say, with all due respect, I understand this process now. I've accessed the process. I've got information that I'd like to share with you, and I think you're wrong on this issue. So, passion for it, have faith that it makes a difference, and also be prepared to sit down in a very diplomatic way, say, hey, with all due respect, you're wrong on this issue. May I inform you otherwise?
So there's that approach, which involves in it a sense of knowing what is right. And we've got a lot of citizens at the local, state level who are just kind of ambivalent. They're not sure what's right or wrong, who to listen to. And so some of the folks who've joined the webinar today have asked to know some community building, capacity building strategies and approaches for the common people. And I use common people as everyday people, and bringing them into the experience of finding the most effective answer for the political decisions in front of us as a community, a state, and a nation. So in that regard, let's talk for a little bit about how everyday folk who are working in organizations, working on issues, and fighting an uphill battle to get others engaged with them. Something perhaps from your experience that would be a practical application that someone watching this webinar could take away today.
Well, I can tell you an experience that I had that was an individual who was opposite of me. I'm conservative. He was liberal. He would always get on to me when I was in Congress about my votes and, question everything I did. And one day I was coming home early in the morning, and I saw him walking down the street, and he had a garbage bag in his hand, and he was picking up trash. And he wasn't court ordered to do this. He did it voluntarily. He was picking up trash. The next day, I see him in the morning out there picking up trash. I was so impressed about this that it hit me, and I said, my gosh, this is what civic engagement is all about. It's not necessarily running for office, but it's taking ownership of your citizenship by going out there and making your community better. And I wrote a letter to the editor explaining that here was a guy who did not agree with me politically, but he was setting such a great example of civic engagement at a level that all of us can do, just taking care of what we have as a community. And I think what it leads me to say is that if we focus on what we do have in common, first of all, we have to get out of our comfort zones. We have to get comfortable with being uncomfortable and going to people that don't agree with us and most likely never will agree with us on certain issues, but that will allow us the opportunity to develop the relationship and find out what we have in common. We all want to have a better community. We can pretty much agree on that, whether we're left, right, or indifferent. And if we can focus on that, this is where we make the changes in the communities, but you got to get out of your comfort zones and get comfortable with being uncomfortable.
Right. I want to speak to three levels. Number one, going back to the local chambers of commerce, and they have their leadership academies, which are phenomenal. In Orlando, they have maybe 150 at least young business people who get involved in the leadership academy. They learn to structure government, the civic process. They visit not-for-profits, for-profits, corporate world. It's well-rounded. And Dennis, you might have been involved in Leadership Florida, which was started, as you will recall, by the Chamber of Commerce probably 30 years ago, the State Chamber of Commerce. Another leadership. If you look at not the faculty, but if you look at the membership at the Alumni of Leadership Florida, it is extremely influential group of people. And my third level I want to talk to are the people who are on the phone call today, the webinar today, who are leaders in their own right. Obviously, they would not have an interest or not be in a capacity today where they are leading. How do you use your influence? So my question a rhetorical question to the participants today, how do you use your innate leadership abilities to go beyond your single role? I mean, beyond what you do, if it's advocating for voter registration, but you've got the leadership skills, you've got that currency. How do you take that to another group and involve other groups and share with them how to be a leader? So everyone on this call today is in a leadership position. They've got this leadership currency, I call it, and they've got the ability to basically share and do what Dennis and I are talking about is how do you exponentially increase the involvement of others in the community.
Interesting question. Dennis, would you care to respond to that?
No, I think Dick's absolutely right. And that's where the difference is made, because once these people go through these leadership programs, once they've been exposed to the process, once they see the significant impact that can be made through their involvement, it becomes almost magnetic. They get in tune with their communities. And that's why I'm saying this has to start at a community level. These leadership programs are very, very effective. Yeah. And some of the most impressive alumni have come out to be great leaders in the state of Florida. And so I think, Dick's right on point there, is that we've got to be able to encourage, recognize, and reward those that are willing to take leadership positions, not necessarily because they're running for office, but mainly because they want to make their community a better place.
And in the political elected official world, at the municipal, state, and national levels, there are what's called citizen academies,
Yes,
where everyday folk who are interested in learning more about their government, maybe the city level, the county level, through the sheriff's department or the supervisor of elections, they go through a series of workshops that helps them to be more informed and to make connections that will certainly help them.
Yeah. So
as we are winding down, before I open it up to the participants for their questions, I would like to ask both Dennis and Dick if you have closing remarks, or as I say in the forum, if there's something you've wanted to say and you were waiting on the question, well, now's your turn.
I'll defer to the question.
And I'll follow.
All right, then we'll move now to participant questions. Do we have any, Robert, from the participants?
We don't have any in the chat, but please unmute yourself and ask any questions you have. What's been presented and or what is on your mind and you'd like to get a response to.
So as we are awaiting those questions to come, this is a wonderful opportunity. I have personally want to thank you all, Dennis and Dick, for taking a moment to share. And I love a good story, and each of you has written about them in your books. Would ask you now to share a story about working with the most unlikely person or an unlikely person that ultimately not only got you a victory, if you will, in terms of a policy, but also a new friend, someone that you didn't think you'd be able to work with, and now you've worked with them beyond that one issue.
I can tell you a real quick story. It actually happened post-Congress. I had served with a female Democrat, a Black female from Maryland by the name of Donna Edwards. Donna and I were cordial while we were in Congress. We were nice to each other. We never agreed probably on anything, but we were on a trip together with a group on a diplomatic trip from some former members of Congress in Korea. And I found myself at a coffee table in a coffee shop waiting for some others. And she was there sitting across from me. And I thought to myself, I don't know what to talk to her about. I've got nothing in common. I mean, she's liberal, I'm conservative, she's black, I'm white, she's female, I'm male. And so I just asked her a question. I said, Donna, what did you do when you got out of the Senate? I mean, out of the House. And she said, I went and bought a motorhome and traveled for 6 months across the country visiting national parks. Well, this just lit me up because I have a motorhome. I've taken my children to go visit all these national parks. And next thing you know, Donna and I are talking about the needs of the national parks. We're realizing that they have deferred maintenance, that they don't have money to do it. Next thing you know, Donna and I work on this partnership. We lobby Congress together to make a change in how private industry can partner with the national parks in order to provide funding for them to do deferred maintenance and other things. And I love it because we still don't probably get along. She gets on MSNBC and is a guest commentator, and I love to watch her. And one time she was taking a trip to Alaska in her motorhome, and wherever she had internet service, she'd stop and she would do broadcast on MSNBC. And I'd watch it because I'd look in the background and I could see that's the wall on a motorhome. And she's just, she and I to this day have become dear friends because of a common interest that broke barriers that were put there for political reasons. And that to me was very strengthening and encouraged me more to do the same thing. As I said, get out of my comfort zone and be comfortable being uncomfortable. Yes.
Yeah, look for the common ground, the intersection.
Yes.
You know,
Janice, you're right.
It reminds me of a poem by Maya Angelou called Human Family, you know, and she starts out saying, I note the obvious differences in the human family. Some of us are serious and some thrive on comedy. Some declare their lives are lived as true profundity. And she goes on with this. Right. But she mentions travels and says, I note the obvious differences between each sort and type, but we are more alike, my friends, than we are unalike. We are more alike, my friends, than we are unalike. And so your story, which I read, it's part of your book as well, really brings out the exemplifies and gives us a picture of what Maya Angelou says in this particular.
Yeah, but she also said when somebody shows you who they are, believe them. So so we'll see. May I give one example that's not dissimilar to Dennis's example? The back in 2003, and the point I want to make is that people can convene around an issue for different reasons. Back in 2003, the school board came to me and said, look, we have 138 schools in some state of disrepair. Some are literally falling down. We have no money. We've tried 6 times to pass a referendum for a half a penny sales tax. We've tried it 6 times in 20 years. They all failed. Would you lead a campaign to pass the half a penny sales tax? I said, that wasn't a very encouraging introduction to the question. It's already failed 6 times. But I did, and my co-chairman for the campaign was former Republican Congressman Lou Fry. Reached across the aisle when we raised $500,000. When we did a poll, I had a Democratic poll and a Republican poll. So we could basically show it was a bipartisan effort. We reached out to the African American community, the Asian community, faith community, the corporate community, the Chamber of Commerce, others to bring them together. There was a group called Axe the Tax, which is very, very much opposed to the late Doug Batchelor, very much opposed to the tax for oftentimes nebulous reasons. But he was opposed to it. So Republicans were not in support of it. 2014, they came back and said, well, we don't have enough money yet. Will you do it again? We did it then. Now, here we are in 2024, and I'm chairman of the Change for Kids, the half a penny sales tax for the 3rd time. I told them, by the way, if I have to do this every 10 years, in 10 more years from today, I will be, if I'm still here, too old to care. So we better get it done now. But the Republican Party endorsed the tax.
Wow.
Now, then you ask why. The Republican Party endorsed half a penny sales tax, but on the 3rd time on the ballot. And by the way, it's already raised $4.5 billion. With a 10-year extension, it raises another $10 billion. But see, I said, well, they're not going to support a tax because it's a tax. But guess what? They came back and said, no, we support it from an economic development standpoint. If you're spending $4.5 billion and you're using your average econometric modeling, that's about a $1.5 multiple. So it's a $6 billion economic impact. It provides thousands of jobs. So we innately said, you're never going to support a tax, right? They came back and said, no, but we'll support it for the right reasons. Their reasons are different than the initial reasons for it. But again, the point I'm trying to make, if you're engaged in a conversation, it can work out.
Well put.
Yeah, and your example there of Change for Kids also points to the fact that the way a lot of business minds come at an issue is very different from
Yes.
someone from a social service sector.
Yes.
And being able to break down an issue in various perspectives so that people can see their way in. You know, the Kettering Foundation created many years ago the National Issues Forums Institute, and they do NIF forums. And whenever an issue is framed, there is never just 2 points. You know, there's always 3 and sometimes 4, so that anyone who comes to discuss that issue can see himself or herself, can see their idea, their solution in one of those approaches, and therefore can contribute to the conversation.
Yeah, to your point, the board of realtors voted to give us $100,000 to the campaign directly, and also to fund 2 direct mail pieces in addition to that. So they probably invested $175,000. Well, realtors is a very conservative group, but why do they want half-penny sales tax to pass to keep building these new schools? Because when somebody relocates to Orange County or any county, they have kids that are school age. What's the first question? Where do you want to live? What school will my children be going to? So they understand that having all these new schools really a very positive attraction for people building homes. So you've got a conservative group like the realtors endorsing the tax and helping fund the passage of it. Back to Dennis's point, it might not be as obvious up front, but if you keep discussing it and look at different perspectives of why it might appeal to them, some point in time you'll garner support for the majority vote.
And business chambers are beginning to look more and more at the adverse effects of not having good schools, children not being able to read in the 3rd grade, not being ready to go to kindergarten, and so forth, because down the line, these are the workers in a community. These are this is the future of their business, and so an investment in people now makes more sense, I guess, than in times past. And I think it's just a wave, and we're back there now where we have the Florida Chamber of Commerce with its community scorecard, framing the discussion around these issues that have been overlooked, and the need for maintenance and renovation and a half-cent sales tax to provide that infrastructure development now makes sense in a way that it perhaps hasn't in the past. So from Emily, we have a point that says, really appreciate your story, Dennis. I'd like for the presenters to share their thoughts on how we can move past the emotions, the anger that seems to be so present today when it comes to politics, in order to get to a place to begin building consensus bridges.
Well, first of all, it's going to be a toxic political environment no matter who wins at the national level. It just is, because the country is so divided almost down the middle, with just a little margin there. So, and again, I think it has to be issue driven. It can't be just partisan driven. So if you can find an issue where you can reach across the aisle, literally, Democrat, Republicans, and maybe independents too, but it's going to have to be issue driven, and also, in my opinion, community level driven. Yeah. Whether it's a state level or the community level, it's going to have to be, some of those national issues going to have to be addressed at the community level, engage people based on the issue and not on the raw politics.
Yeah, and I agree with that. In fact, I think that as we look at the problem and start breaking it down into its most basic functions, it comes down to the individual. And one of the things I try to tell my students at Southeastern is that you need to be the leader that you want to see. And you need to be able to just not react in such a fashion, because most of us are very, well, 95% of our reactions are controlled by our subconscious. So, and we train our minds to do that, but we've got to retrain them. And so each individual has to understand how important an issue may be to them, may be more important to somebody else. What I'm saying is that we have to begin being taught and disciplined and practicing through exercise the ability to overcome our own prejudices and biases in order to reach across the aisle to find out what is better for the greater good. And that's a difficult thing. And that's a difficult question that you asked, because if it was such an easy question, we would have fixed it by now. But we're looking at changing this over a generation. We have to undergo a cultural change to get there. And it only starts, as Dick pointed out, in one area, and that's in each community. And the civic health of Florida is not good. And a good civic health is breeding ground for the individual to want to become better and become more diverse in their relationships, their understandings, and in their productivity to create a better community. So, I think it comes down to having each one of us having to look within to get things done and to change the way we have been doing things in the past.
And I think too, again, the people who are participating today, think about how you could take your political, I'm going to call it a leadership currency, what you know, what you've taught, what you do every day. How can you share that and apply it and then engage people yourself? Because you obviously have the talents to do that. So I would, again, encourage you to do just that.
And so there's a skill set that includes some of the points that you just made. One, a willingness to not respond to everything, right? That doesn't require a response. Since being elected, I describe them as, is this a distraction or is this key to what it is that we're trying to do? So be able to identify the distractions, don't have to respond to everyone, intentionally look for others to have conversation with that are on the opposite of whatever your opposite is, and we've talked about what some of the common opposites are, because beyond that, there's an intersection of common ground. And so to look for that. In Dick's book, he gives strategies, 5 steps for bridge building and so forth. So if you haven't read either of the books, Dennis's is more of a memoir with some specific strategies there at the end. And Dick again gives the pointers of being a bridge builder. So this is from Courtney Young. She says, we've discussed the importance of our community leadership programs, and then getting to the question here, what would your advice be for established leaders who have, 1, effectively supported local aspiring leadership programs focused on policy and civility, and then 2, participated in discussed leadership programs? So what else can leaders be doing in their community on top of encouraging aspiring leaders and becoming more in tune with their local community? Who'd like to go first?
I'll be happy to just address a great example that I was just made aware of a couple of weeks ago. I did a program, a Congress campus program at Rhode Island College with former Congresswoman Val Demings. And as part of that program, the Secretary of State of Rhode Island spoke. He was a history teacher throughout his career. He served in the legislature and was elected 2 years ago. But he started a Rhode Island civics leadership program, predominantly funded by private philanthropic funding. But it is a program that recognizes leadership potential in high schools. The students are nominated by their teachers, and then they spend a year in a program and then culminate it with a 2-night summit, learning more about government, learning more about each other, learning more about issues. And I use that as an example because there is an established leader that took the initiative to create a program to engage these students, and it has been incredibly overwhelming. Now, granted, it's Rhode Island; it's about as big as Polk County. Geographically, they can get around. But I think that's where, if an elected official, if a leader takes the initiative to develop these programs and engages the private sector. so that they're not using government dollars to do this, which usually comes with mandates and some strings attached, you see that there's an appetite, a consumer demand, in this case, students that want to participate and become better leaders.
Yeah, and I want to go back again and apply that to particularly young people in your organization. Young people they need to have some confidence level about how to approach government. How does it work? How can I use government? How can I access government without being intimidated by it? They really need to know, because if they don't know, most likely they'll fail to get involved. And what happens? Anytime you can have 25% of voters designating who the president's going to be, or the U.S. Senate's going to be, or the U.S. Congress is going to be, basically you're having 25% a minority who has the authority to dictate to the majority. By definition, you no longer have a democracy, or if you want to call it a republic. What you do is you have a minority-driven government structure. That's inherently dangerous. But I think young people, if they don't get involved in the process, you basically surrender your influence. And one of the worst Supreme Court cases, in my opinion, was the Citizens United case, where basically the Supreme Court said corporations are individuals that have unlimited ability to give to campaigns. And I can even say on my side now, my candidate for president is going to spend $1 billion. $1 billion. But that's where we are now. But so, in my opinion, the exponential increase that you have in special interest money, there's a diminution of influence of the average voter. And they see that and they feel that and they get discouraged by it and don't get involved. But the bottom line is you have no choice. You have to be involved in the process. If you're not, Jefferson said the best government that serves the people the best is the closest to the people, local government. So you really have to encourage these young people to be involved and start at the local level.
I agree.
So we've got a few more questions. I see Tim Dutton's hand. I'll come to you in a moment. Tim, did you want to add? I'm sorry, Dennis, did you want to add something?
No, go ahead.
Okay, Tim.
Yeah, I want to sort of piggyback on this issue of local that Dick was mentioning explicitly. Certainly people need to choose to be more engaged and involved. At the same time, I want to focus at the local government level. Government processes at the local level don't make that easy.
You're right.
And all you have to do is look at what the public meeting process is. And it is hardly an engagement. A. B, the other issue, or the other component to that, is that so often public meetings are held at times when it isn't very easy for a lot of people to participate in any way, shape, or form. So I'm really interested, because there's a bunch of bright people on the screen, on how is it that we think of local government as being a solution to generating processes that facilitate engagement instead of making it difficult?
Good question.
It's a very good question. The most impactful form of government is local government. And unfortunately, what we've seen because of the decline in local press is less accountability from our local governments. And I think that's been a disservice that allows local governments to be more, I wouldn't say dictatorial, but more autocratic in the way they operate now in limited, engagement processes. Janice made a good point. They have citizen advisory boards and things of that nature at local government, which are very important. There are political appointments, but that's the nature of the whole process. I think the most impact that we have is getting people engaged on the local levels. And I can see where you're coming from, because I've seen it happen here in Polk County and in Lakeland, where people feel like they're shut out. Now you're only allowed 2 minutes to say your piece, or we're going to try to get everything done in 2 hours, and you got 100 people that want to speak, and I didn't have the benefit of serving in a local government, and it's probably why I'm still alive. It's one of the hardest things. It's one of the hardest forms and the most impactful out there. I wish I had a good answer for you.
Like, could I, and I'm going to defer to to the congressman on that answer, but I wanted to go back on the young people again, and it applies locally too. I'm on the board of a group called Florida Children's First, which is an advocacy group statewide for children in foster care. And we were able to pass legislation to extend the age of foster care from 18 to 22 and a great number of other things. But let me tell you how they did it. I didn't do it. It was brilliant on their part. They basically took foster children, taught them how to lobby, taught them how to talk to elected officials.
Wow.
Took them to Tallahassee, scheduled meetings with legislators, and the young people basically, as from their perspective as a foster child, talked about the need for this legislation, and it passed overwhelmingly. It's a very successful piece of legislation. But the point is here, who can you engage with you? And that might be speaking directly to the issue to go with you, whether it's a local issue or whatever, how you're impacted personally is always a good. I was criticized because oftentimes I did a lot of work in the disability community and would bring people with some physical disabilities to lobby for budgets for APD, Agency with People with Disabilities. And some legislators criticized me and said, that makes me feel uncomfortable. Well, I said, well, number one, it's factual. Number two, it's real. Number three, it's a personal testimony. So I'm really not concerned about how you feel, except I want you to feel positive about the issue. So I guess the point here is reach out to others who you can bring to the table with you, who from their own perspective and life experiences can speak directly to the issue, as opposed to you being a spokesperson for an organization representing that agenda. But I always say as an advocate, put a face on it. Whatever the issue is, put a face on it. If it's a disability, put a face on it. If it's domestic violence, child abuse, opioid crisis, put a face on it, because people will respond to those human stories.
Yes.
Well, thank you. And we are at the end of our dialogue. Gentlemen, thank you both. Dennis
Thank
Ross,
you.
Thank you.
And Dick Batchelor. Congressman, we thank you for your service. And Dick, we thank you for your service and for bringing those
Thank you.
insights. I want to thank those who asked questions. Emery, Courtney, and Tim, thank you for participating in that way. And so we'll turn it back over to Robert Jones with the FCA. Thank you.
All right.
Thank you, Janice.
So we have 4 days to go before an important election, but we need to look beyond that, like it was demonstrated in this conversation today, to the very varied elements of civic life and civic health, and all sorts of things and ways to be engaged to improve your community. So just wanted to mention FCA is a membership organization. Encourage you to consider joining. We typically will convene. We convened in October 23, a summit, a 2-day summit, brought a lot of expertise to bear on issues related to civic life. And I will say that we're going to produce our next webinar in January of 2025. And I will be, we're going to skip over the holiday period of November, December, and I will be sending out notices of the programs that will be in play in January on. So again, thank you so much to Dick and Dennis and Janice
Janice.
Thank
for
you.
a great conversation.
Could I think Dennis and I will agree, if you want to reach out to us individually, please feel free to do so. And then at the last moment, I was going to predict the outcome of the presidential election, but we're out of time. Sorry.
I love it.
I'm flipping a coin. I'm flipping a coin.
Exactly.
Thanks for your time.
Thank you all.
right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Janice, good work. Really good work.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dick.
Thank you. Have a good one.
Okay.
We survived it with our ailments, Robert.
Great.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.